Kairi.
I was just suggesting it. One more time.
Kairi.
Okaeri! Welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be doing the Positions book tag. To go. Anyway. This tag was created by Rachel from Let Me in the Library. Now I know that most of my most recent videos have been tags, but this was just so good. This original tag that she created was so good with such interesting prompts that I just had to do it. So first off, thank you, Rachel, for making the tag. And second off, thank you for tagging me in it. I'm really, really excited to get started. Also, I know that the environment has become very Christmassy. I mentioned earlier on my channel when I still had the kind of fall-ish background that I am a Christmas-loving bitch over here. Like, no shade, whatever. I can't control myself, so I have become Christmasified, and that has kind of necessitated a bit of a change in my angle, and I'm a bit farther away from the camera than I usually am. So if you guys, have a hard time hearing me or whatever, let me know in the comments down below. But so far, I'm really liking this vibe. I know I'm doing an Ariana Grande tag, and I know that Rachel also loves her, but as kind of an antithesis to this, I'm not a huge fan, and I haven't listened to a large chunk of her new album, although I have heard Positions. So each of these prompts is associated with the song that I probably haven't heard. So, I'm not quite sure what the connection is between the song and the prompt, but I'll number them anyway for everyone's benefit. So if you know the song, you can go by the song title. If you don't, then you can go by the number. Okay, editing Taylor here. I just want to make sure that I emphasize here, even though I'm not a fan of Ariana Grande, Rachel did such a good job with these questions and with having really unique book prompts that it doesn't really matter that I haven't heard the songs. I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that, but it's in no way a dig against this tag. It's a wonderful tag, and I think that there's a lot of merit in doing it. So I just want to make sure I repeat again to give Rachel major props for creating this. The first prompt is for the song Shut Up, a book you couldn't shut up about. If you've been around my channel for any portion of time, this will be 0% surprise to anyone, but that book is going to be Jade City by Fonda. Now, typically I would be holding this up, but with this new setup that I have, I've precariously placed this poinsettia on my bookshelf, and it's resting right on Jade City, which is right here if you can see the spine, and I'm not trying to disturb that poinsettia right now, so just look at the spine. I'll put a picture up in the corner if I have to, but Jade City is the book that I cannot shut up about. It's an Asian-inspired fantasy that is kind of mixed with sci-fi, and it's by Fonda. The second book in this series, Jade War, has also been released. You can see it behind me, also beneath the poinsettia. So it's going to stay nice in its home there. But both of these books follow the same main characters, which are members of a gang or a mafia vibes family that live in a city called Janloon. In this city, Jade is the source of all power, be it political or raw power. So ingesting Jade, not ingesting, but having Jade on your person imbues you with multiple skills, multiple superpowers essentially, and allows you to have physical prowess. It also is the main moneymaker for the country. So those who are involved in the production and the exportation or distribution of Jade make a lot of money in this world. This story follows a bunch of great main characters as they navigate this world and figure out who they really are at their core. It is so so good. If you haven't read this, if you're part of, fantasy booktube and you haven't jumped on this series yet, I'm begging you to. It is so good. See, I'm even getting closer to the camera because I really want you to understand how much I love this book. Pick it up, please. Prompt number 2, 3435, a book that you stayed up to finish. Now for this one, I have 2 answers.
One is something.
The first one is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. Now, I am a Brandon Sanderson fan. Down on the shelves below, you can see I have a large collection of his books. But typically, when I read anything from the Cosmere, I take my time. I might take a long time to read it, but I enjoy every page. This book, however, which isn't in the Cosmere, but it's still like the same style writing, this book, I could not put it down. There's not enough tabs, I don't think, for how much I love this book. But I couldn't put it down, and I stayed up all night to finish this. And it's not short, but best believe I finished it. It's just such a page-turner, you just can't stop. And the characters are so lovable, and I never thought that I would enjoy like fight scenes in space or in the atmosphere with spaceships or planes. I was completely engrossed by those scenes. So this book is amazing, and I finished it really, really, really late at night. The second book for this prompt is The Empress of Salt and Fortune. Now, this is a recent read of mine, and it is a novella, so it doesn't take a long time to read in general, but once I started reading it, I was not going to be putting this down at any point until I was done with it, because it was so good. I've had my eye on this book for a really long time, actually. I think it might have been Books in Lala, maybe, that I saw first mention it like quite a while ago. And I thought, oh, that looks really interesting. Let me put that on my to be read kind of in the future TBR. But then Tammy over on Tammy Tries to Read read this book, and she was raving about it and just couldn't stop talking about how much she loved it. And that solidified that, okay, I have to pick this up. Not eventually, but soonish. As soon as I started listening to the audiobook, I knew that I was in for the entire ride in that 24-hour period. So I listened to it on my way to work, and while I was at work, I was thinking about it the whole time. And then when I arrived back home, I still hadn't finished it, but I had to break to do some stuff at home. And before I went to bed, I listened to the rest of it, just laying on my couch, just listening to it. And it did not disappoint. 5 stars. I adored this book. So if you haven't read this novella, it's really hard to explain, but it's got this kind of fairy tale vibe, like you're sitting next to a fire being told a story, but it's got like feminist aspects to it, and it's Asian inspired, so it has like a different kind of setting than most fairy tales you would hear, and it is so, 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 so worth your time. Prompt number 3, Motive, a book that left you questioning everything. For this one, I'm going to go with The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. Now, I haven't read anything else by N.K. Jemisin. Actually, that's a lie. I did start The City We Became, but it got returned to my library, so that's like in process. But this is the only book by her I've read in full. I'm definitely interested in reading her backlist because I did struggle with this book a bit, I'm not gonna lie. The first half of the book was just not working for me so much, but once things got going, they got going, and I couldn't put the book down. So I would say the first 200 pages were a bit of a struggle for me, but the last like 200 to 250 pages, I think that's the length of this book, you know what I mean. The second half of the book, I was hooked and I wasn't gonna put it down. The reason that this is the answer to this prompt is the end of this book had me staring at a wall for a good 2 or 3 minutes. I'm not kidding, I'm not making this up. I just put the book down, you know, softly, and I just looked at a wall, trying to process how that happened in a really good way. I have every confidence that the future books that I read by N.K. Jemisin will have the same effect on me, but for now I can only speak for this book, and this one definitely left me questioning everything. Number 4, Just Like Magic, a book with all of your favorite tropes. There are a lot of tropes that I enjoy reading, but my probably top favorite is like found family or a group of friends who seem to have no connection in their personalities or previous life, but have to be brought together for some purpose and eventually create a found family. So I'm a big fan of just spending time with those characters and seeing their interactions together and, you know, eventually hopefully succeeding in whatever goal that they have. But I just love that witty banter kind of setup for a friend group. Now, because this is my favorite trope, I have a lot of books that fit this trope, but I'll just go over some of my top favorites. One of those is going to be The Lies of Loch Lumora. This book specifically has a friend group. The later books kind of, you know, transfer in and out, like who is in that in-group, but this particular book with the original group that we are presented with is one of my favorites. And I love how these different personalities come together to be able to pull off different heists and different cons, and they're like playing with danger all the time, which results in a lot of really, really funny situations, and I just adore that aspect of this book. The second book I have here is Robert Jackson Bennett. The second book I have here is Foundryside by Robert Jackson Bennett. I don't talk about this so much on my channel nowadays, but this is one of my favorite books and this is one of my favorite series. And this kind of has again a ragtag group of friends trying to pull off a heist. Our main character Santia has this skill to touch objects and know what their experience has been for a certain period of time. And she's a thief, which makes her very, very good at being a thief. Where our story takes off, she steals something that she doesn't realize the true importance of. God, this is really slipping out, isn't it? Maybe something about the way I hold the book. When we are introduced to this series, Santia steals something that she doesn't realize the true importance of, and that kicks off a lot of different adventures for the future. And those adventures bring in different personalities, different types of people that have to work together towards a common goal. There is also a sapphic romance in here that I adore. The next two books I'm going to talk about with this trope are Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I mean, these are booktube babies. If you don't know what these books are, I don't know where you've been, but they deserve all the hype in my opinion. These are probably some of the most reread books on my shelf when I'm having a bad day, when I just need to jump into a world that is not my own. I pick these up and I feel like I'm part of a family. And finally, the last book in this section is going to be the Stormlight Archive, or Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, from the Stormlight Archive. Now, there is a group called Bridge 4 in this group, which if you haven't read the Stormlight Archive or you're not into the Cosmere, maybe you've never heard of before, but it is a group that has that found family aspect to it. And in this particular book, we get a lot of those types of interactions, and I really, really enjoyed that. I don't want to get into any types of spoilers anywhere anyhow, but just know that Bridge 4 also really fulfills that trope, and I get so much joy out of reading about them. Number 5, Off the Table, a book that raised your standards. For me, this is actually going to be a YA fantasy that I read earlier this year called The Remnant Chronicles. I know this was a booktube baby in the past, and I actually read it as part of my Retro Reads Booktube Challenge, which I do on my channel, where I read previous books that were popular on Booktube and see what I think. I'm actually going to be making a wrap-up for that series for this year soon, so keep your eye out for that. But for me, I typically read adult fantasy. Now, it's not that I don't enjoy YA fantasy. I mean, I just, splurged about the Six of Crows duology. So I do enjoy YA fantasy, but my expectations, possibly incorrectly, tend to decrease when I'm picking up a YA fantasy because I expect to see the same types of tropes. And while those tropes do have their place, I do go in with that expectation. However, when I read the Remnant Chronicles, it showed me just how good YA fantasy can be, even if there are tropes included. This series blew my mind with the female friendships and the themes that were tackled and handled so well throughout the series, and turning different tropes on their head, honestly, in a beautiful way. And I just enjoyed every second of reading this series. I read them back to back to back to back, and I gave them all 5 stars, which is really rare for me. Now I expect all YA fantasy to be able to give me that level of joy and reach that standard. Number 6, 630, a problematic book that you love anyway. Everyone has a guilty pleasure series, myself included. I have many, but the first one that pops to mind is Onyx, or the Lux series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I again picked this series up for my Retro Reads BookTube challenge, expecting a trashy paranormal romance, and that's what I got, and I adored it. As soon as I read the first book, I got the second one out of the library. And I haven't read the third one yet because other books have taken my attention, but best believe I intend to finish this entire series, which is pretty rare for me when it comes to kind of throwaway or trashy, you know, paranormal romance. I might read 1 or 2 in a series and then not continue, but I fully intend to continue with the series because I loved it. It's got that boy who has a sad past and therefore is not the nicest person, which I usually hate that trope, but something about the way that it's written here really works for me. It's got that main character that's not like other girls, but also she knows about that trope. It's like a very self-aware book, so she makes fun of that aspect within the book, which is refreshing as well. And it's trash and I love it. What else can I say? Number 7, Safety Net, a book you immediately knew was a 5-star read. Now for this, I'm going to pick Nevernight by J. Kristoff. This is a book that I did buy, the special editions of because I loved it so much, but they're only in America, so I don't have them with me. But the Nevernight series was one that I picked up from my library because I'd heard a lot of people talking about it. And as I'm sure you've heard many people say, once you're a chapter or 2 into the book, you know if the writing style is for you or if it's not. And it was 100% for me. I love that series. That book, as soon as I was about 2 chapters in, I was like, I'm gonna adore this, and I need to purchase it for myself for the future because I'm already obsessed. Nevernight is about a girl named Mia Corvair who goes through a very traumatic experience as a child that costs her her family, and she decides to get revenge on those who took her family from her. This is not one of those books that says, trust me, believe me, she's an assassin, though you never see it on page. This book shows you the nitty-gritty from page 1, and I loved it. Number 8, My Hair, a well-known author whose work you haven't touched but are interested in. For me, this is going to be Robin Hobb. She is a very prolific fantasy writer, and she has a bunch of series out there, but I just haven't picked them up yet. Just recently, I watched a video from Erin over on Booked and Busy's channel, and she loves the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb, and that really inspired me to finally get my ass in gear and pick up a book by her. I don't know much about the series, except that it's kind of like a classic fantasy, but that it's written with beautiful writing and the character work is amazing. And as a character-based reader, I just really want to pick it up and see what I think of this like gigantic name in fantasies works. Number 9, Nasty, a new release you can't wait to read. Now this answer is both not surprising and also shameful because those 2 books are The Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter and Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. Both of these books were extremely hyped for me all year. And so I pre-ordered both of them because I couldn't wait to get into them. And then when they finally came, shipping takes a while for me, but when they finally came, my life has been, and still is, a bit chaotic and a bit busy at the moment. I'm starting my own company, I'm doing a lot of things that are changing in my life, and both of these books I want to read by physically sitting down and reading them. Now, I mean, Fires and Vengeance I can probably manage to put in my bag, but this one ain't going in my bag nowhere. So if I want to read them physically, I have to read them when I'm at home and have time. And I haven't had that time recently, so I haven't cracked either of these open, which is just... You can come at me in the comments down below, that's fine, because I'm coming at myself. Like, this is just sad. In the next couple weeks, though, I am taking time off for Christmas and for New Year's. Christmas is a big deal in American culture, and New Year's is a big deal in Japanese culture. So I'll have that whole chunk of time off, and I really, really want to just sit down and marinate with these books and dive into them. Number 10, Westside, your favorite series. Look, this is an impossible question for me. I cannot make a choice. I really have never been able to. So I'm just gonna name a bunch of series that have probably already been mentioned in this video, but that I just love with all of my heart. The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee, Jade City, Jade War, The Lies of Loch Lumora, or the Gentleman Bastards series by Scott Lynch, The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, Foundryside and Shorefall, and the next book to come in the series. You know, I don't know what the series name is. Tell me down in the comments down below if you know. But that series by Robert Jackson Bennett, The Burning by Evan Winter, Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. Oh, you know, one thing that I haven't mentioned on my channel much, which is one of my manga or anime favorites, is Fruits Basket. That is a fantastic series. It's so, so good. And it also has that found family trope that I was talking about, with a bunch of different personalities coming together. Honestly, one of the best examples of that trope that I've ever seen. So that one is definitely an absolute favorite of mine, and I reread it whenever I'm feeling down. Number 11, Love Language, a comfort book you keep returning to. I've already mentioned a bunch of these in this video, actually just before, with Fruits Basket and Six of Crows. I go back to both of those when I need to feel better. Also, the series by She Who Shall Not Be Named, the Harry Potter series. I go back to that whenever I'm feeling down. I mean, my copy of The Goblet of Fire is just not even connected by the spine anymore because of how much I've gone back to that book, so that is also a comfort for me. Also, Sailor Moon actually holds a lot of comfort for me as well. I really enjoy going back to the beginning of that series when all of the original senshi, all of the original characters, I guess you could say, all the original warriors are starting to be gathered and they're finding each other. Again, that found family trope. I really do love it, clearly. If anything, this tag has shown me how much I love that trope. But I do love going back to that series and enjoying that beginning part as well. Number 12, Positions, a book that subverted a cliche. For this one, I'm going to actually go with a couple stories in a story collection, and that's going to be The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. I've talked about this book in some of my more recent videos, but I still don't think that this gets talked about enough, honestly. And this is a short story collection that comes from the Grishaverse. It reads like a book of fairy tales that children from that world would have read or been told when they were younger, and it's got that perfect mix of whimsical and dark and creepy and also hopeful. These are some of Leigh Bardugo's best works, and it makes me really sad that not a lot of people talk about them. There are a lot of subversions of tropes in these stories. Some of them that come to mind at the moment are, there's a story here about a dark wood with a witch who supposedly eats children, but things aren't exactly all that it turns out to be, and the result is haunting, and I still think about that story to this day. There's another story about a princess who has a bunch of people competing for her hand, and what this princess chooses in the end is also really unexpected in the best way possible. So I still think about that one too, honestly. There's also a third story about how a villainess came to be. And while that does follow some tropes that are established, there are some things that are turned on their head in that story as well. And it's just fantastic. There's that word again on my channel. I can't help it. Read this. We've got 2 more prompts to go. Number 13 is obvious. A book you loved from a genre you don't usually read. I've actually got a couple answers to this one, although honestly, what answer hasn't had multiple at this point? But the first one is going to be Black Girl Unlimited. I don't read contemporary works almost ever, and you'll notice that basically all 3 of these are contemporary works. And clearly I can pick ones, I seem to be pretty good at picking contemporary works that match my style? Who says my like? That match my preference, because I don't like this genre, but I have liked all of these books. And Black Girl Unlimited is an amazing story about a young girl who is fighting against a system that isn't made for her to succeed, but she starts to find little bits of magic in herself and use that as an inspiration to succeed in life and help others succeed. And it's beautiful. I haven't talked about this book for quite some time, since my wrap-up actually, which might have been like in September. But this book is amazing, and if you haven't picked it up, even if you're not a contemporary reader, I highly recommend giving this book a try. The second book on this list is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Now, I have mentioned her on my channel a bit in the more recent videos, but I don't tend to pick up books that are written in verse. It's just not really my thing, but Elizabeth Acevedo is my exception. I think that she writes so poignantly in such a good balance of beautiful poetic writing while also telling kind of a straightforward story. And it's so well done. So The Poet X, I gave it 5 stars. I read it from start to finish in one sitting, and I highly recommend that you also pick it up. The third one on this list is Beartown by Fredrick Bachmann. Now, you've probably heard me mention A Man Called Ove by this same author on my channel a lot. It is one of my favorite books. I adore it. Please go read it. But I want to draw some attention to another book by him that also broke my heart and really impacted me in like the best way. I feel like I've neglected to talk about this book because I read it before I was on BookTube, and I don't think I've mentioned it in many videos, but this book is fantastic. It's phenomenal. It's amazing. I can't use enough adjectives to describe it. When I was listening to it, I broke down crying, and I still think about the quotes from this book to this day. Beartown is about a small town where hockey is everything. It is what everyone lives and dies by, essentially. And there is a new girl in town who is raped by the kind of star of this hockey team. And it's about the fallout and the consequences and the division that comes from that. And it's written from such a, what's the word I'm looking for? Such a sympathetic perspective to all the aspects of this story that it's just heartbreakingly beautiful. And the end of the story, like I said, I remember it to this day. I think about it often. And I really, really think everyone needs to pick this up. The last one, number 14, is Point of View, POV, a book you'd like to see told from another POV. For me, this is going to be The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. I read this book a couple months ago now, and unfortunately, I wanted to love it, and a lot of people that I really trust on BookTube do really love this book, but for a bunch of different factors, I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. I do have a full review of this on one of my wrap-ups on my channel. I'll be sure to link it up above. But for some reason, multiple reasons, I didn't like this book as much as I wanted to or I could have. And I think something that really would have helped is to have a different perspective in that book. So there's a character that does a 180-degree turn near the end of the book that just makes no sense. And every other character seems to accept it, like, oh, this is cool, yeah, this makes sense. And I'm here as a reader like, no, this makes 0% sense. So For me, if I could have gotten some chapters from the perspective of that character, I think I really would have enjoyed the book more, because then maybe it wouldn't have been a complete 180 and I could have seen this change coming in a more realistic way. That concludes my positions tag. Thank you so much for making this tag, Rachel. It was amazing. I loved these prompts. They were so original. Please go subscribe to her. I'll leave everything down below, as I said in the beginning of this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my answers to this, whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me. If you've got some things to say, leave those down in the comments down below, and I would love to have a conversation with you. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jenny!